Hi there, today I'm going to show you how I prep my shirts for making a t-shirt quilt. And I don't use an interfacing type iron-on stabilizer. I use a starch, undiluted stay-flow starch directly onto the shirts as my stabilizing method. So to prep the shirt, the first thing I'm going to do is lay it out flat, and I'm going to just cut the top part away from the bottom or the back part. And so to do that, I'm just going to cut up each side and through the underarm seam, and then cut it apart at the top seam there. So let's go ahead and do that. And this shirt has a side seam, so it's easy just to follow along that. Okay, and then we'll do the other side. Okay, and so then here I have them separated at the side seams, and then I'm just going to come right through the center of the sleeve and right across that shoulder seam through the neckline, and then do the other side as well. Okay, so then I have the back of the shirt and the front of the shirt, and then it's ready to go ahead and add the starch. Okay, for the starching process, I have laid down a towel, and this is just over a bathtub, and then I put a board across the bathtub, and then just put the towel on the board. And I'm just going to lay the shirt out as flat as possible, and then I'm just going to leave it that way so that the starch can dry, and then I don't have to worry about pressing it or anything because I've set it up to be nice and flat. Okay, so I've just laid that out there like that. And then I'm using Stay Flow liquid starch and undiluted. So straight out of the bottle. And we're going to spray it directly onto the back side of the front of the shirt. So I have the front side facing the towel, and then I'm totally going to drench this and just let it sit to dry. Okay, and now I have added the starch to the whole backside of the front of the shirt, and I'm just using this automatic garden sprayer that I got on Amazon, and it is an electronic one, and I like it because it has the hose that has a tip on it where I can bend it down, and then this little guard kind of keeps it from spraying all over the place. It's kind of more directed right on the shirt. So that's really helpful. And then I'm just going to leave that shirt set there for a couple hours and just let it dry. Okay, once the shirts have all dried, I just lay them all out onto a pile, and then they're ready to go ahead and cut. And so you can see that once they're dried, I don't know if you can hear that, but they are pretty stiff. There's not any stretch to them. I'm pulling pretty tough. It's not stretching, not going anywhere. So that's going to hold its shape when I'm piecing them together to other shirts. And also when it's quilted or during the quilting process, it's going to stay nice and flat. And then once the quilt is done, you can launder it and all that starch is going to come out in the wash. And then you'll have your shirts back to their soft, pliable, nice weight in the quilt without having that added layer of interfacing. Sometimes it comes apart, the glue comes apart from the shirt, and then you have that separation. There's just an extra layer of that interfacing in the quilt, and this way you just don't have to deal with that. So once your quilts or your shirts are starched and ready to go, you can just do your preferred method of cutting. What I do is just go ahead and lay a ruler right on the design, the area that I want to have. And then with my rotary cutter, just go ahead and cut all the way around it. And then you have all your squares ready to sew into your quilt. Now I have all my shirts cut and I've kind of already arranged them into piles. I picked out a size that I want my quilt to be. Length and width in a certain amount of inches. And so then what I did is just figure out how many rows that would be. And I've determined that I need 6 rows going across. And so then I have 6 different piles. And so it's kind of hard to see, but this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So those will be rows. And then that will give me the dimension I need width-wise of the quilt. And then I just went through and divvied up equal amount of graphic shirts in each row as best I could. And then I've placed them offset a little bit of each other so then I can see the colors that I have kind of going on in each row, just so that I get equal distribution. Like I don't want all the white shirts right across from each other or all the navy shirts just on this side. I kind of want them spread out throughout the whole quilt. So this just gives me a quick visual without, putting them all up on a design board. This is just kind of a way to make sure that I have enough filler pieces and my color distribution is good, and that I can kind of get an idea of what other pieces I need. The first thing I did was I went through and cut all the shirts. I knew I wanted them all to be the same width, and so the length just depended on what the graphic was on the shirt. So I got the majority of the graphic and then a little bit more, and then on the bottom of the shirt I would cut these filler pieces. And so then what I went through with each pile is I just figured out, okay, I know I need X amount of inches to be the length of each row. And so then I just calculated based on the sizes of the pieces I had to get that amount per row. And then that way I know that each row is going to be the same length. Now I've got everything kind of figured out. This row here, I determined that I need about 6 more filler pieces of a bunch of different colors. So I am gonna go starch a few more shirts. I saved the backs of all the shirts and I keep those handy in case I need to go back and put more filler pieces in, because I didn't have any more graphics. So I'll just use pieces like this that again just help distribute the color, kind of give it a balance, that type of thing. So I can go ahead and sew a few rows together and then just as needed starch a few shirts and cut a few filler pieces just to make everything work together. I'm at the sewing machine now and I'm going to go ahead and piece together row 1. And what I'm doing is I have all my shirts laid out here and the filler pieces. And so I picked up the first shirt that I'm going to use and one of the filler pieces. And how I kind of keep track of the right side versus the wrong side of the shirt is I always, after I cut it, I always leave them in a stack and right side's always on top. So as long as I don't ever drop the stack or, turn it upside down if it falls on the floor, then I'm okay. Then the right side is always facing up. And so that's how I've laid it on my pile. And I am going to start my row with the filler piece. And the reason I do that is I know that I'm going to quilt it and put a binding on it. And so if I overlap my binding by like 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch, there's the possibility that, I could cut off some of the graphics. So I do pick graphics that go on the outermost parts of the quilt where the binding would go. I pick some that I know I can still see the graphic. They have a little bit of wiggle room in there so that it's not going to cover anything up. And this one's kind of close, so I am going to start with a filler square at the very top because I don't care where the binding hits there. And I will have plenty of room on this side that I will not cover up the graphic with the binding. So I'm just going to go ahead and put them right sides together and line them up. I do have a walking foot on my machine just because it feeds it through a little bit better, but you don't have to. They are really heavily starched, so I'm not too worried about pinning. They kind of stay put where I place them. And I am using just a shorter stitch length with just a white thread. I always just have a white thread on there and just use that for my piecing. But if you were to still maybe have a longer stitch length and you pulled on your seam after it was sewn, and if you see the stitches or your little thread stitches, go ahead and decrease your stitch length, and that will help tighten that up and so you won't see your threads. So again, I'm just going to line these up, and I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch. I am going to backspace or backstitch just a little bit there at the beginning just because I don't want them to get, pulled apart or opened when I'm rearranging. And just keep lining up my edges. Okay, and then I'm going to take this out and we'll see what we have. Clip that thread there and here. Okay. And then again, because they are heavily starched, I don't really need to do a lot of pressing. I can finger press and they pretty much stay where I put it. Now, if I did want to go ahead with the iron and press it, I would take a piece of freezer paper. No, it's not freezer paper. It's parchment paper that is heat tolerant to a certain degree. It's something that you could use like a baking sheet on a pan in your oven when you're cooking. So I just take one of those sheets and place it over the graphic to do any kind of pressing, because the heat from my iron could possibly melt the paint or the ink from the graphic, and then it would get all over the iron. It would smear onto the shirt. So the least amount of pressing I can do is very helpful. And again, the starching that I did ahead of time to prep the shirts really help with keeping it finger pressed. I don't have to go back and do a lot of pressing on it. Okay, and so then I'm just going to pick the next piece to go on here, and I'm just going to sew it together as a row. And so I have everything laid out. I think I will go with this one next. And so again, I'm just going to line it up right sides together and get it lined up there, get my threads out of the way, and stitch that seam. finger press this back. And there I have a good start to the first row. So I'm just going to continue sewing and adding all the shirts until I get that row complete. As I'm working and the row is getting longer and longer, I kind of roll it up or kind of fan fold it onto itself so that it's not dropping off the table, creating drag or pulling while I'm trying to sew it. And so these last two pieces, I know that they're going to go like this. So since they're two smaller pieces, I'm going to piece these two together and then add it to my row. So I could have done that all along, just so you know, smaller units onto bigger units and then add it and kind of grow it along. But this one I do have the wrong side. So with a t-shirt, the good thing is I can kind of tell which is the right side and wrong side if I did have it moved or flipped, and this one was flipped. So I made sure to get the right side, but in the whole grand scheme of things, once it's in the quilt, it wouldn't really matter. If I would have sewed it, I wouldn't have taken it apart. Okay, and so that's just going to make it easier to add it to the row without lots of pulling and all that good stuff. So I am kind of trying to press all the seams in the first row, pressing them down. And then in the second row, I'm hoping to have the shirts offset so that seams aren't matching up, that they would, you know, appear in different parts. But in case it does happen, then the second row I will press everything up so that they would nest if I do come across any that do have to match up. So, and then now I'll just go ahead and add this to the end of the row, and then row 1 will be completed. Okay, and I'll just press that one down, and so then row 1 is done. I'm at the ironing board and I have the first row and second row joined together, and so now I am kind of pressing that. I'm doing a finger press as I go, just kind of pushing the seam the direction that I want it to go. And then this here is the parchment paper that I use to put over the top of the quilt, just so I'm not putting my iron directly onto the graphics of the shirts. Anytime that there's like a paint or a logo or something printed, it can smear with the heat. So just having this little protective layer in there makes a huge difference. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of set those. And it's going to keep your iron clean too, because that's never fun to get stuff on your iron and have to clean it off. So, so that's the process. I'm just finger pressing my seams all to one side. The parchment paper goes on top, and then I just give it a press. And then I'll just do this with each row that I add.